Here is a story carved so deep, it does not heal clean. In the high timber east of Greyhorn Ridge, where the wind dies suddenly, and the silence feels like judgment, a warrior saw a white cloth caught in a place no outsider should ever touch. Below him, 4 men closed on a woman who had already lost everything except the will to stand. He could have turned his horse and disappeared into the canyons forever. Instead, he spoke 5 words that changed 3 lives and broke the quiet of a sacred place. Walk away or bleed. What happened next is what the land itself will never forget. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun had bled out behind the western ridge, leaving only a thin smear of red along the horizon. Makoa sat motionless on the granite outcrop knees, drawn-up rifle laid flat across his thighs. The wind had died completely. No hawk called. No juniper twig scraped against stone. The silence pressed in like a hand over the mouth. A scrap of white cloth, no bigger than a man's palm, had lodged itself in the narrow crack of the marker rock. That crack had been there since his grandfather's time. A deliberate split in the stone, a boundary the old ones had cut to remind the living where the land stopped speaking softly. Nothing foreign belonged there. Nothing. Makoa's gaze settled on the cloth. It was clean cotton torn from something finer than trail gear. Someone had passed close enough to brush the rock, close enough to leave scent. His nostrils flared, once tasting dust and horse sweat and the faint metallic bite of gun oil. Not Apache horses. Not his. He did not move to touch it. Touching would make the violation real. Leaving it would let the wound fester. Below, in the long throat of the valley, dust rose in thin plumes. Horses. More than 2. The rhythm of their hooves carried up the slope, steady, not panic the gait of men who believed the outcome was already written. Makoa knew that gait. He had heard it 7 winters ago, the night the false papers came and the band moved in snow too deep for children. His fingers tightened on the rifle stock, not enough to shift it, just enough to feel the walnut warm against his palm. The cloth fluttered once, as if the land itself had exhaled. He rose slowly, joints stiff from sitting too long in the cold. The rifle stayed across his thighs. He stepped to the edge of the outcrop and looked down. The dust clouds were closer now, spreading like ink in water. 4 riders at least. Maybe 5. They followed the creek bed where the woman had tried to run. Makoa's breath came even shallow. He could ride away. The high trails were still open to him. He could vanish into the canyons his people had walked before the first wagon wheels scarred the earth. The land would forget one more stranger passing through. Or he could go down. The cloth caught again on the rock, twisting. A small sound, barely a whisper, cut the silence. Makoa's jaw flexed. He remembered the child who had not survived that winter move. 3 summers old. Too small to walk against the wind. He had carried her body back himself, wrapped in his own blanket, because the ground was too hard to dig. He looked once more at the cloth. Then he turned, swung into the saddle of the dark horse, waiting in the shadow of the pines. The animal shifted under him, ears flicking toward the valley. Makoa nudged the horse forward. Not fast. Not slow. The way a man moves when he knows the choice is already made, and there is no undoing it. Behind him, the white scrap remained pinned in the crack like a wound that would not close. From the valley floor, the hoofbeats grew louder. The dry creek bed lay open under the late afternoon sun, stones bleached white and cracked like old bone. Lena's mare stood splay-legged flanks, heaving saddlebags still heavy with the weight of papers that had cost her 8 months of sleep. The 4 men had come in from the east, horses' fresh dust still rising behind them in a slow yellow veil. Pike was the first to dismount. Thick through the neck eyes, small and pleased. He stepped close, boot-crunching gravel, and grabbed her arm above the elbow. She twisted once hard, but he yanked her down. Her knee struck a flat stone. Pain flared bright and immediate. Blood soaked through the torn riding skirt in a dark bloom. She pushed up back against the nearest cottonwood, breath coming short. Clint Slade stayed mounted, one hand on the horn, the other loose near his holster. His voice carried the flat calm of a man who had already counted the outcome. "Mr. Voss figured you'd try to run. He's always right about that." The others spread out in a loose half-circle, rifles still in scabbards, no hurry. They knew the road behind her was empty. No neighbor would ride out here. No help was coming. Lena felt the bark rough against her shoulder blades. Her wrist throbbed where Pike had twisted it, the skin already darkening to purple. She looked at each face in turn, Pike's grin, the other's bored certainty, and understood with perfect clarity that the ranch, the creek that sang different in summer, the porch boards her father never fixed, all of it could end right here on these stones. She did not beg. She did not cry. She simply straightened, met Pike's eyes, and waited for what came next. Pike stepped closer, savoring the moment. His breath smelled of tobacco and old whiskey. "You make this hard, it gets less comfortable. That's all I'm saying." Lena's right hand balled into a fist. She swung once awkward off balance, catching Pike on the jaw. The blow stung her knuckles more than it moved him. He laughed low and rough. The others joined in the sound, flat against the dry air. Then a voice came from the ridge above. Low, even, certain. "Walk away, or bleed." The laughter stopped as if cut with a knife. Makoa sat the dark horse at the crest, silhouette sharp against the white sky. Rifle across his thighs. Not aimed, not needed. The horse stood rock-still, ears forward. Makoa's face carried no anger, no triumph, just the quiet of a man who had already decided. Pike's hand froze halfway to his gun. Clint Slade turned slowly in the saddle, eyes narrowing. The other three shifted weight, uncertain now. Makoa did not speak again. He did not need to. The silence stretched heavy as wet canvas. Wind moved once through the cottonwoods, rattling dry leaves. Somewhere far off, a hawk turned on a thermal, indifferent. Lena pressed her back harder against the tree. Her knee bled steadily now, soaking the fabric stiff. She watched the four men calculate 4 against 1 and saw the moment the arithmetic changed. Pike spat once into the dust. "This ain't your fight, boy." Makoa's eyes never left him. "It is now." No one moved. The sun slid lower. Shadows lengthened across the stones. From the ridge, the dark horse shifted one hoof. A small sound hoof on shale, but it carried. Pike looked up at Makoa a long moment longer. Then he stepped back, slowly. The others followed. Clint Slade tipped his hat, once a gesture without courtesy. "We'll see you again, miss." They mounted. They rode east, not fast. Would have looked like running, but without looking back. The hoofbeats faded. Dust settled. Lena let her breath out in a single, ragged stream. Her hands shook. She pressed them flat against her thighs and tried to steady them. Makoa nudged the horse down the slope at a walk. He stopped 8 paces away, dismounted without hurry, gave her space. He looked at her knee, at her wrist, at the blood on the stones. "You're hurt," he said. Not a question. She met his eyes, dark, steady, without pity. "I've been worse," she said. He nodded once. Then he stepped closer, slow, and crouched to look at the damage. The silence between them was thick, unbroken, except for the distant call of that single hawk still circling high above the ridge. The timber closed around them like a held breath. Pine needles muffled the horse's hooves. The air smelled of resin and cold stone. Makoa led them up the east slope in the last gray hour before dawn, picking a path only he knew. Lena followed reins slack, letting the mare find her own footing. Her knee throbbed with every step. The horse took a dull heat under the fresh bandage. Her wrist ached beneath the clean strip of cloth Makoa had wrapped around it tight, but not cruel. They reached the lean-to just as the first thin light touched the ridge. It was no more than a slab of granite propped against another roofed with branches. A small fire pit lay inside, ringed with stones the size of fists. Makoa dismounted first, tied both horses to a low pine, and led them to a seep that trickled cold and clear from the rock face. Lena slid from the saddle, favoring her good leg. She stood a moment, breathing the sharp pine smell, then lowered herself to a flat stone near the pit. Makoa built the fire with 3 sticks and a handful of dry needles. Flame came quick low smoke, rising thin and straight before it vanished into the canopy. He crouched beside her without asking, took her wrist in his hands. His fingers were warm, calloused, careful. He checked the swelling, turned her palm up, then down. No words. She did not pull away. When he finished with the wrist, he moved to her knee. The bandage was already spotted dark. He cut the old cloth away with his knife-short, clean strokes, then cleaned the cut with water from his canteen. The sting made her breath catch, but she made no sound. He applied a thin layer of pine tar salve from a small tin, and then wrapped fresh cloth around it. His movements were unhurried the way a man works when time is short, but haste would ruin the job. He sat back on his heels, not broken, but it needs rest. Lena flexed her fingers once. The bandage felt solid. She looked at him, really looked. The hawk feather behind his left ear caught the faint firelight. His face carried lines she had not noticed before, the kind etched by years of hard seasons and harder choices. "You don't have to do this," she said. Makoa poked the fire with a stick. Embers flared, died. "I know." Silence settled again, thick as the timber around them. From the valley floor far below came the distant sound of hooves, faint but steady. More than before. He spoke without looking up. "By morning there will be more of them. Harlan Voss does not accept failure." Lena felt the words settle in her chest like cold lead. She had known it already, but hearing it from him made it heavier. 8 months of fighting alone, of reading every clause in that cursed note, of watching neighbors turn away, she had carried it all. Now someone else carried part of it, and that felt worse somehow. Makoa went to his saddlebag, came back with a strip of jerky and a piece of hard cornbread. He handed her half without ceremony. She took it, chewed slowly. The meat was tough, salty, the bread dry. She ate anyway. He crouched again, closer this time. The high route takes 5 days. It stays above the main trails. But it crosses land my people have used since before wagons came. She swallowed. And if Voss finds out Makoa's eyes met hers, he will not stop at your ranch. The fire popped once. A small spark drifted up, died before it reached the branches. Lena looked at the low flames. She had come here to survive, nothing more. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. Yet here she sat, wrist bandaged by a stranger's hand, eating his food, listening to him speak of land that was not hers. She set the remaining bread aside. "If I go alone tomorrow, I won't make it." Makoa nodded once. "You won't." Another silence. Longer. He rose, banked the fire down to coals. "We leave before first light. Sleep if you can." Lena lay back against the granite coat, pulled tight. The rock was cold through the wool. She stared at the dark branches overhead. Sleep did not come easy. When it did, it was shallow, broken by the sound of distant hooves that never quite faded. Outside the lean-to, Makoa stood watch. He did not sit. He did not move, only listened. Far down in the valley, a single torch flickered small, steady moving, slow along the creek bed. Eli Greer carried it alone. He stopped once, looked up toward the ridge, then continued. The flame bobbed like a question no one had answered yet. Makoa watched it until it winked out. The night grew colder. The timber held its breath. The high trail clung to the eastern face of Greyhorn Ridge, like a scar that refused to heal. Sometime before dawn, the mist had rolled in thick, swallowing sound and distance. Makoa rode ahead, horse-stepping careful over loose shale that shifted under iron shoes. Lena followed close enough to see the hawk feather in his hair catch faint gray light, then lose it again. The air tasted of wet pine and cold rock. Every breath carried the faint metallic bite of coming snow higher up. They came to the small seep at mid-morning. Water dripped slow from a crack in the granite, pooling in a shallow basin no bigger than a man's hat. Makoa dismounted without a word, led both horses to drink. Lena swung down knee-stiff and hot under the bandage. She stood a moment, weight on her good leg, watching him. A circle of stones lay a few paces from the seep, small, deliberate, half-buried now in needle duff. One of them had been moved. A fist-sized chunk of red sandstone, foreign here, carried from lower country, sat dead center in the ring. Makoa saw it first. His shoulders tightened a fraction. He did not speak. Lena felt the change in him the way she felt the mist on her skin, quiet, insistent. She had watched him for 3 days now, the way he read ground before he stepped on it, the way he listened longer than he spoke. This was different. This was older. Makoa crouched beside the circle. His hand hovered over the red stone, fingers open, not touching. 7 winters ago, he had stood in a place like this with his band. The papers had come then, 2 false words on white sheets promising safety if they moved. He had read them, believed them, led the walk through snow that swallowed children. The circle had been there that winter, too smaller for a different purpose. He had not touched it wrong then. The land had touched him instead. He lifted the red stone slow, as if it weighed more than stone should. The act pulled at something inside him, old grief, fresh guilt. To leave it would let the violation stand. To move it without right would repeat the error. He set it aside on bare ground, away from the ring. His lips moved once, a single Apache word spoken so low it might have been breath only. No translation offered. None needed. Lena watched without speaking. She understood silence better now than she had 8 months ago. She knew what it cost to break it. From the valley far below came a sound, faint at first, then clearer. Hooves on hardpack, not many. Steady, coming up. Makoa rose. His eyes followed the sound down through the mist. They found the lower trail, he said. Someone showed them. Lena felt the words settle cold in her stomach. Her knee throbbed sharper now, as if it remembered the stones in the creek bed. She looked at the circle of stones, empty now, but marked. She looked at Makoa. The hawk feather hung still. His face carried no anger, only the weight of a choice already half made. He turned to her. If we keep to this route, Harlan Voss will know the high path exists. He will know it leads through land my people still walk. She swallowed once. And if we turn back, you die on the open trail. Or they take you back to him. Another silence. Longer than the last. Lena looked down at the red stone lying separate from the circle. She understood what it meant to him without him saying. She understood what it would mean if she asked him to keep going. Makoa mounted again. He waited. She put her foot in the stirrup, pulled herself up. pain shot through her knee, hot and bright. She bit down on it, settled in the saddle. He nudged his horse forward. She followed. The mist thinned as they climbed. Far below, a single torch flickered in the gray, small, steady moving along the creek bed. Eli Greer carried it. He stopped once, looked up toward the ridge, as if he felt eyes on him. Then he kept walking. Makoa did not look back again, but his hand rested longer than usual on the rifle across his thighs. The trail narrowed ahead. The mist closed behind them. The meadow lay hidden in a fold of the northern ridge, ringed by thick pine and aspen that shivered silver in the thin wind. Sunlight reached the grass in slanted bars, warming the ground where snow had melted days ago. The air smelled of wet needles and the faint char of old fire. Makoa reined in at the edge, horse blowing soft through its nostrils. Lena drew up beside him, knees stiff from the long climb saddle leather, creaking as she shifted weight. A single rider waited in the center of the open ground. Chaco sat his horse, motionless blanket coat dark against the pale grass. No greeting, no raised hand. He watched them approach with eyes that gave nothing away. Makoa dismounted first. Lena followed, boots sinking into soft earth. She felt the meadow's quiet press against her, the kind of quiet that remembered footsteps long after they passed. Chaco's gaze settled on her a long moment, then moved to the saddlebag at her side. He did not speak. Makoa walked forward, slow steps measured. He reached Lena's mare, unbuckled the oilskin packet without hurry. 30-some pages wrapped tight. He held it out in both hands. Chaco leaned down, took it with the same deliberate care, tucked it inside his coat against his chest. Still no word. Lena felt the absence of sound like a weight. She had carried those pages 8 months through nights alone in the ranch house, through lawyers who would not meet her eyes, through the cold certainty that no one else would stand with her. Now they rested against another man's heart, and that heart belonged to a people already pressed too hard. Chaco spoke, then, voice low, rough from disuse. Harlan Voss sent men higher today. They know this trail exists. Makoa's jaw tightened a fraction. Near the far tree line, a thin thread of smoke rose, old, dying from a fire pit someone had used the night before. The grass around it was trampled flat. Hoof prints led away south. Chaco's eyes flicked to the smoke, then back to Makoa. They were here before first light. Looking. Makoa nodded once. The gesture carried no surprise, only recognition. He had brought Lena this far across land his people still walked in secret. Every mile had cost something small but permanent. A footprint left where none should be, a stranger's breath on ground that remembered only Apache feet. Chaco straightened in the saddle. I will take it to Gus Reed by dark. He rides for Cheyenne City at dawn. Makoa looked at the packet one last time, then at Lena. She met his gaze. In it, she read the question he would not ask, whether she understood what this handoff meant. Not just papers moving north. A line crossed, a door opened that might never close again. She gave the smallest nod. Chaco turned his horse without another word. The animal stepped into the timber, swallowed by shadow and branch. Within seconds, the meadow was empty again, except for the two of them, and the dying smoke thread still curling upward. Lena exhaled slow. The relief came first, thin, sharp, then the guilt beneath it, heavier than she expected. She had used their land, their silence, their quiet endurance to save her own. The pages were gone now. Safe, maybe. But the meadow would remember. Makoa stood a moment longer, eyes on the place where Chaco had vanished. Then he turned to her. From somewhere down the ridge, distant but unmistakable, a rifle cracked once. Not aimed, not hunting. A signal. The sound rolled across the open ground, flat and final. Makoa looked at Lena. His voice came quiet, steady. We have no more trail behind us. Only waiting. Or facing it. The wind moved through the aspen, rattling leaves like dry paper. The meadow held its breath. Somewhere lower, the circle of hunters tightened. The hollow lay deep in the eastern timber, a natural bowl scooped from granite walls high enough to hide firelight and wind. Makoa had chosen it years ago for winter camps, back when winters still held people together instead of scattering them. Now the space felt smaller, the rock colder against the back. A low fire burned in the center hollow coals banked tight smoke, rising thin and straight before vanishing into the overhang. Lena sat cross-legged on a folded blanket oilskin packet open before her. Pencil scratched slow across the last page. She wrote the names, old Apache names, the ones spoken only in certain places at certain times. Her hand hesitated twice. Each letter felt like lifting a stone from a grave. When she finished, she read the lines back in the silence, lips moving without sound. Then she signed Makoa's name at the bottom as witness. The pencil point broke on the final stroke. She set it aside. Makoa stood at the hollow's mouth, back to the fire rifle in the crook of his arm. He had not sat since they arrived. His eyes followed the dark valley below. Torchlight moved there now. 5 points of orange, slow and deliberate, Harlan Voss at the center. Another light flickered separate lower down by the old seep where Eli Greer used to water stock. 1 torch, 1 man. Makoa spoke without turning. If they take us, Harlan Voss will use this place to justify taking more. He will say the land is empty. He will say the names we carry mean nothing. Lena folded the page, slipped it into the packet. Her fingers trembled, once small, gone in a breath. She had carried those names like a wound no one else could see. Now they were ink on paper carried toward men who measured land in deeds and dollars. The law, she knew, said names on paper had power. The law Makoa knew said some names should never leave the mouth of the land. She rose, favoring the knee, and walked to him. The firelight caught the hawk feather in his hair, made it gleam dull red. She stopped a pace away. Makoa looked down at her. We can wait here. The hollow will hide us another day, maybe 2. She met his eyes. And after he did not answer right away. The torches below kept moving slow, patient, the way a noose draws tight. Lena spoke again, voice low. Or we go down. To Eli Greer. Makoa's jaw worked once. He had watched that lone torch stop at the seep, watched the man stand there like he was listening to ground he used to own. Trusting him meant risking everything on a man who had already sold 1 path. Not trusting him meant letting the circle close. He looked back at the fire. The coals had settled into a dull pulse. He reached down, scattered dirt over them with his boot heel. Darkness took the hollow in one slow swallow. We go, he said. They moved through the timber without light. Makoa first, Lena close behind, hand brushing his coat once to keep direction. Pine needles brushed their sleeves, releasing sharp scent with every step. The ground sloped down soft with duff, then harder with shale. They came out near the seep. Eli Greer stood there, torch-low flame, guttering in the wind, off the water. He did not startle when they stepped from the dark. His rifle rested across his forearm, muzzle down. He looked at Makoa first, long, steady, then at Lena. I showed Voss the high trail, he said. Voice rough like gravel under boot. Told myself it didn't matter. But I ain't slept since. Makoa regarded him. No anger, no forgiveness. Just the weighing of a man who had lost sleep for less. Greer shifted the torch to his other hand. Flame flared brighter for a moment through long shadows across the seep. I ain't asking pardon. Just telling you I know what I did. Makoa nodded once, small final. Then, you know what comes next. From higher up the ridge, hoofbeats rolled down more than before, closer, steady. Harlan Voss had found the hollow scent. Greer looked toward the sound, then back at Makoa. I ain't running. Makoa stepped forward slow. Neither are we. The torch flame steadied. The hoofbeats grew louder. The night closed in. The darkness in the timber was absolute, thick as tar between the pines. No moon broke through the canopy. Only the single torch Eli Greer carried cast a weak, flickering pool of orange at his feet. Makoa stepped out, first rifle low, but ready, boots silent on the needle duff. Lena followed, close coat, pulled tight against the night chill, her breath visible in short, controlled puffs. The three of them met in a small clearing, no bigger than a grave, trees crowding close, branches low, no place to sit, no fire to warm hands. Just standing, facing. Eli held the torch, steady flame, guttering in the draft that slipped between trunks. His face looked carved from the same wood as the pines lined hollow-eyed beard, gone to gray. He looked at Makoa, first long and level, then at Lena. No hat tip, no hello. Makoa stopped 8 paces away. The torchlight caught the hawk feather, made it gleam dull copper for a second before the wind took the flame sideways. Greer spoke first, voice rough, low. I showed Voss the high trail, told him where it cuts through the ridge. He paused, swallowed once. Told myself it was just words, didn't matter. But I ain't slept right since. The confession hung between them, plain as smoke. Makoa did not move. His eyes stayed on Greer's face, reading the lines there the way he read ground before stepping. 7 winters ago, he had trusted words on paper. They had cost lives. Now another man stood before him, carrying the same weight, different shape, same burden. Lena felt her pulse in her throat. She had carried her own shame. 8 months the ranch sold out from under her father, while he slept the note she could not break the neighbors who looked away. But this was different. This was a man admitting he had sold a path that led straight into land no stranger should touch. And she had walked it. Greer shifted the torch to his other hand. Wax dripped hot onto his knuckles. He did not flinch. I lost everything once. Land. Son. Name. Figured I had nothing left to give Voss. Turns out I still had this. Makoa's jaw flexed, once small gone. He knew the taste of that kind of debt. He had carried it every night for 7 years awake while the stars turned overhead. To trust Greer now meant risking the last piece of ground his people still walked in secret. To kill him here meant blood on Apache hands, blood that would call louder than any paper Voss could write. The torch flame steadied. From higher on the ridge, torchlight answered 5 points, moving slow, deliberate, closing the distance. Hooves struck stone now, not muffled anymore. Harlan Voss had found the hollow scent. Greer looked toward the approaching lights, then back at Makoa. I ain't asking forgiveness. Just telling you I know what I did. He paused, breath fogging in the cold. And I ain't running from it. Makoa regarded him a long beat. Then he nodded one small final. Greer exhaled, shoulders dropping a fraction. I've lost everything already. Only thing left is to take back what I can. He turned, slow, deliberate. The torch dipped as he started toward the ridge, toward the other lights. His boots crunched once on dry needles, then faded. Makoa and Lena stood in the dark clearing. The single torch moved away, shrinking. The 5 others grew brighter, closer. Hoofbeats rolled down like distant thunder. Makoa looked at Lena. No words. Only the quiet knowledge that the line had been crossed, and there was no stepping back over it. The wind moved through the pines. A branch creaked overhead. The approaching torches kept coming. The clearing lay open between the pines like a wound in the dark lantern light, throwing harsh yellow across the needled duff. Harlan Voss stood at the center coat, open against the night chill. 4 men fanned out behind him, rifles already drawn, muzzles low, but steady. The lanterns hung from their saddles, cast long shadows that stretched and twisted with every shift of the horses. The air smelled of coal oil horse sweat, and the faint char of old smoke still clinging to the timber. Makoa stepped into the light, first Lena at his shoulder. Her knee had stiffened on the walk down. She moved careful weight, favoring the good leg. Makoa's rifle stayed in the crook of his arm, not raised. His face carried no heat, no fear, but only the cold certainty of a man who had already counted the cost and found it due. Voss looked them over, slow eyes lingering on Lena. The smile he had worn in Caldwell Flats was gone. What remained was thinner, tighter, the look of a man watching his ledger turn red. "You're still here," he said. Voice calm, but the calm of a man holding the last card in a losing hand. "The papers are gone, I know that. But you're still here." Makoa did not answer. His gaze moved past Voss to the shadows at the clearing's edge. Eli Greer stepped out first. No torch now, just the dull glow of the lanterns on his face. Behind him came Cade Webb, broad-shouldered, eyes hard, and Elsa Kane, small and gray-haired coat, buttoned to the throat. They carried no rifles. They did not need to. Their presence was enough. Voss saw them. His jaw worked once. The lantern light caught the sweat on his upper lip. Greer stopped a few paces from Voss. He looked straight at him. "It's done, Harlan." Voss exhaled through his nose, short, sharp. "You think this changes anything? A few more names on a list that's already gone north." He gestured at the clearing. "You're outnumbered. You're done." Makoa shifted his weight. Lena felt the movement, small, deliberate. She stepped half a pace forward, putting herself between Makoa and the nearest rifle barrel. Makoa did not reach for her. He let her stand there. The act cost him something quiet and permanent. Voss's eyes flicked to her, then back to Greer. "You brought witnesses. That's all this is. Witnesses." Greer spoke again, voice flat. "We're what's left." Silence fell then heavy as wet canvas. The wind moved once through the pines, rattling needles. A horse snorted, shifted. Metal creaked in a saddle ring. Voss looked around the clearing, 5 against 6 now, the arithmetic shifting under his feet. His hand twitched toward his coat, then stopped. He knew the look on Greer's face. He knew the look on Makoa's. He knew what happened when men like these stopped calculating odds and started counting costs. "Lower them," Voss said at last. The words came out quiet, almost conversational. The rifles came down slow, not eager, not defeated, just down. Makoa stepped forward, took the nearest one from the broad-faced man without hurry. The man let it go. No resistance, no words. Greer's companions moved, then quiet, practiced relieving the others of their weapons. Metal clinked on stone. No one spoke. Voss stood in the lantern light, hands empty at his sides. The arrogance had drained from his posture. What remained was the rigid spine of a man who had not been helpless in years and hated the feel of it. Makoa looked at him. "We'll take you back to Caldwell Flats. Cole Harlan will want you there when he arrives." Voss said nothing. He turned toward the valley trail. The others followed Voss in front, hands loose, 4 disarmed men behind Greer, and the rest flanking. No one spoke. No one cheered. The lanterns bobbed as they moved out. Shadows stretched long behind them. Makoa watched them go until the last light winked out among the trees. Then he turned to Lena. Her face was pale in the dark. but steady. The wind moved again. Somewhere higher on the ridge, a branch cracked, small, sharp. The sound carried. They stood in the empty clearing. The ground beneath their feet had been walked on too many times tonight. The land would remember. The sun rose slow over the eastern ridge, spilling pale gold across the sage flats below. Makoa and Lena stood on the high shoulder above Caldwell Flats, horses ground-tied a few paces back. The town lay small and gray in the valley roofs, catching first light smoke rising thin from chimneys. No movement yet in the streets. Only the quiet of a place still asleep or pretending to be. Harlan Voss had been escorted in at first light. Makoa watched the procession earlier from this same spot. Voss riding straight-backed hands, loose on the reins, 4 disarmed men trailing Greer and the others flanking silent. They had taken him straight to the land office. Cole Harlan was already there. 2 federal deputies at his back coat, still dusty from the ride. Papers changed hands in the doorway. No shouts, no struggle. Just the slow grind of men with ink and authority. Lena stood beside Makoa, coat collar turned up against the morning chill. Her knee had stiffened overnight. She favored it now, standing with most weight on the good leg. The wind carried the smell of sage and distant wood smoke, and underneath it, the faint, metallic tang of coal oil from the lanterns that had burned all night. Makoa's gaze stayed on the town. The hawk feather in his hair moved once in the breeze. His face held no satisfaction, only the flat calm of a man who had walked a path and found it narrower than expected. He had led her across land that should have remained untouched. Names had been written down. Places had been marked on paper that belonged to no man. The ground remembered. It always did. Cole Harlan had spoken to Lena briefly before the others rode out. It'll take months, maybe a year. But it begins. His voice had been dry, factual, no warmth, no promise beyond the words. She had nodded, said nothing. Now the words sat in her chest like cold stones. She looked at the ranch far below her ranch, still distant, still hers on paper only. The porch boards her father never fixed. The creek that changed its song in summer. She had fought 8 months to keep it. Now it might come back. But the man who built it would not. The nights alone in the house would not unhappen. The woman she had been before the debt note arrived would not return. Makoa shifted his weight. The rifle across his back caught the sun once, a brief flash of metal. He had not spoken since they left the clearing. The silence between them was not empty. It carried the weight of everything unsaid. From the high point across the ridge, a figure stood alone. An older Apache woman, blanket-wrapped, tight hair gone to gray. She did not move closer. She did not speak. She simply watched, eyes steady on the town, on the 2 figures silhouetted against the dawn. Witness, not rescuer, not judge, only memory walking. Lena felt the woman's gaze like a hand on her shoulder light, but impossible to ignore. She turned to Makoa. His eyes had found the same figure. He did not acknowledge it. He did not need to. She drew breath, let it out slow. "I'll need help rebuilding the ranch." The words came plain without plea. No question mark at the end. Just fact spoken to the wind, as much as to him. Makoa looked at her then. The hawk feathers stirred again. He gave no smile, no promise. Only a single nod, small, deliberate, final. The wind moved through the sage below. The town began to wake, thin smoke, rising straighter now. A door opening somewhere. The older woman on the far ridge turned away, slow, blanket trailing. She vanished into the timber without hurry. Makoa and Lena stood a moment longer. Then they turned from the view. The horses waited patient. The trail back down waited too. The sun climbed higher. The land held its silence. The sun hung low over the western ridge, bleeding red into the sage flats below. Lena and Makoa stood on the eastern shoulder horses, ground-tied a few paces back, reins trailing loose in the dust. No one spoke. The wind moved steady through the grass, carrying the dry scent of sage and the faint metallic bite of cooling stone. Far down in the valley, the ranch lay small against the horizon, roofline sharp in the last light, the creek a thin silver thread that caught the dying sun. It was hers again on paper. Not yet in truth. Makoa stood with his weight balanced, even rifle still across his back, hawk feather still in his hair. The feather did not stir. The wind had gone quiet here. His face carried no triumph, no relief, only the flat calm of a man who had walked a long trail and found the end narrower than the beginning. He had not chosen this ground. The ground had chosen him. Now it bore the marks of too many boots, too many words written where words should not have gone. The land remembered. It always did. Lena felt the ache in her knees settle deeper, a dull heat under the bandage. She had fought 8 months for this view. Now it lay before her unchanged, and changed at once. The porch boards her father never fixed still waited. The house would still be empty when she walked in. The silence inside would still echo the same. She had won something back, but the winning had taken pieces she could not name. From the high point across the draw, the older Apache woman appeared again. Blanket-wrapped, tight hair gone to gray, she moved slow to the small circle of stones half buried in the earth. She knelt without hurry, picked up a single pebble, smooth, dark, foreign to this slope, and placed it in the center of the ring. Her fingers lingered a moment. Her lips moved once, a single word spoken so low the wind took it before it reached anyone else. Then she rose, turned, and walked into the timber. The shadows swallowed her without sound. Makoa watched her go. His hand rested once on the rifle stock, then fell away. Lena watched too. Neither spoke of it. The sun slipped lower. The valley darkened in stages, first the flats, then the creek, then the ranch itself. Smoke rose thin from Caldwell Flats. Harlan Voss was still there, waiting in the land office under guard. The papers would move slow. Months, maybe more. The threat had not vanished. It had only changed shape. Lena drew breath, let it out slow. The air tasted of dust and pine resin and the faint char of distant fires. She looked at Makoa. He looked back, eyes steady dark, without question. No hand reached, no promise passed between them. They stood a moment longer in the cooling light. Then they turned from the valley. The horses lifted their heads as they approached. Makoa swung into the saddle first, slow, deliberate. Lena followed, knee protesting as she settled. The wind moved once more through the sage. The circle of stones on the far ridge lay quiet now, one pebble out of place. They rode down the slope together. The land watched them go. The silence followed. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso Legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.